So my first grinding jig, let me show you it. It is right, hold on. Okay, it is right here. And this jig serves me well. I still use this jig. I'll continue to use this jig. It's quite simple when you look at it. There's not much to it. And people, on one of my videos, people gave me some nasty comments about my weld job. I'm not a welder. It got the job done. I've used it, I've ground hundreds of knives with it, and it's held just fine. But anyway, so the first jig was a variation on what they called a Scandi jig, which it had a piece of angle right here, and then I just added another piece of angle here. The only innovation that I brought to this, if you want to even call it that, was the use of corian. So what would end up happening with two pieces of angle iron, if you got too close to the edge or whatever, you know, or if the two pieces of angle iron weren't exactly square, you'd kind of be going like this and that when you would grind it this way and then grind it that way. So that was my first attempt at a grinding jig. This is the second. So I seek to solve that problem with the corian, and then I had a piece of angle, and then I adjusted that to just a flat. But to help it clamp correctly, I threaded this in so that you could offset for the thickness of the blade, so that the clamp, use my hands here, so that the clamp wouldn't clamp like this onto the blade or like that onto the blade, but that you would clamp it equal onto flat and square onto the blade. That mostly worked. This helped, but it still didn't get it quite perfect. The reason for the corian is, if you look here, when you're grinding, that little extra corian, when you're grinding on this side, the side that the flange isn't on, acts as a flange so that you can keep it flat to the work rest. This worked great. Like I said, I've ground hundreds of knives with this, but I've made a couple other changes, a couple other innovations. I want to show you those. Put this guy over here. This is what I'll call 3.0. Continuing to use corian, a piece of corian. You can get this stuff on eBay, cut-offs, or even buy a corian cutting board, whatever you need to do. It's pretty strong stuff. Interestingly, I made some changes. On the old one, I just super glued the piece of angle. You'll notice on this one I didn't take the time to paint it blue. But I super glued the angle onto the corian. And that worked fairly well, but eventually it would come off. Then I have to sand all the glue off and redo it. There's a little bit of a hassle. And then sometimes it didn't fit square. And I want to talk to you about square in a minute. But this time, I just drilled it. When you do corian and you put a screw in corian, make sure you drill an adequate pilot hole, because this stuff, it grinds really easy, but putting a screw through it, you'll just sit there and the screw will not go. And I snapped off the head of several screws trying to go through there without a adequately large pilot hole. So just 3 screws, I countersunk them. Now for the angle. Now I have a surface grinder. Now you could probably accomplish this on a regular grinder without a surface grinder. But one imperative thing about this jig is that the angle between the work rest, and in this case it's the corian on top of the work rest, and the angle iron, that has to be a perfect 90-degree angle. If it is not, even the slightest bit, it makes your grinds wonky. Just a fraction of a degree, it seems, will be noticeable on your grinds. But as you can see, I got a 1, 2, 3 block there. That is pretty tight. That is pretty tight. That is dead on. That's a big deal. But the other piece of it is that the knife is mounting up square to the surface, because even in my other one, maybe sometimes they just got a little bit this way or that because I didn't have it lined up perfectly in between the 2 clamps. So I've gone a different route. Now I make this is the primary knife that everybody seems to want to buy. Probably, I like to think it's because of the design of the knife and whatnot and the craftsmanship. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's Rex 121, and not many people make knives in Rex 121. But I have some other projects on the burner as well. But anyway, but I grind a lot of these. Like, I have 80 of these to get done. I mean, it's like all day long I'm grinding these things. Anyway, so I got 80 of these to get done. These are soft. Rex 121, when it's soft, is still around 42 Rockwell. So soft is a relative term. But these are not heat treated, put it that way. And I laser cut and water jet most of my blanks. But even if I didn't, I could still use this if you have a pattern. So I made this jig specifically to grind this knife. And you might be saying to yourself, well, I make different knives all the time. If they're really, really different, this might not work for you. But if you make similar knives, now I'm using the actual holes that will fasten the scales. But I know a lot of you guys, if you're not water jetting, you're putting holes all over in your knives anyway to lighten it. You could just make sure you have a couple holes that would place this knife on this jig the way you want it. Because then, now I'm doing one after the other, like jigging the thing up and taking the time to put it in matters to me. But with this, so this is a just a regular flathead screw. It's actually the same screws I use for putting my scales on. And these are the same standoffs. I mean, this is all stuff you can get at McMaster Car. These are the standoffs that I use for my my blades. But this does a couple things for me. It keeps the plunge line at exactly the angle I want it. Now I started grinding this one just so you have something to, something to look at there. So it keeps my plunge line, and it also keeps my plunge line where I want it to start. Now let me show you why. When I come in and grind, you see I'm hitting right there. So I can't take the plunge any further than that. So that defines where my plunge is. Now eventually your belt hits here once in a while. So what I did was now this is super glued. I just super glued on some titanium just to give me some wear. When it gets chewed up, I'll take it off and super glue on some more titanium. Or whatever, mild steel, hardened steel, whatever you have that'll fit there. And so it establishes, woo. I did that once when I was grinding a knife and I went, meow. Ruined. Anyway, that establishes this guideline, but it also establishes the angle of the plunge as well. So it accomplishes those two things for you. So the differences in a standard jig. I have these pre-configured holes here, and all I need is this one little clamp. It's not even clamping that hard because it's got those holes to index on. It's not going anywhere. The second kind of change is because it's fixed how the knife is sitting in the jig every time, it's defined this direction. And so this works as my plunge stop because it hits the side of the platen. Now, you see this weird shape. Like, did I mess up? Or was this just the only shape of Corian I had left? No and no. The reason this is here, so when I'm grinding on this side, actually, if I had a bigger piece of Corian, I would put, maybe this will be 4.0. If I had a bigger piece of Corian, I'll put another wing out here so that one of the things that can happen to you, even when you're grinding with a jig, is you're grinding here, but you're going like this. Look, it doesn't take much to do that. I found for me, I did it more on my right-hand side. So what I did was I put that little wing there. I have the cutout so that I'll miss, when I'm on the other side, so that I'll miss I miss all the apparatus there for connecting the platen. But what it does for me on this side, and for me it was this side that often I had the problem of tilting over, I put my wrist, so you can see it's there, I put my wrist right there, And now I have this, and it gives me a little more purchase on it, and it's not going to go like that. Truth be told, I need to get some more corian, a bigger piece of corian, so I can put a second wing on it down the road. This really makes your grinding, if you're grinding with a jig. I know some people think grinding with a jig is cheating. This video is probably not for you, because I think that is silly. But the other thing is, when I put the screws in, they came out, they stuck out a little bit. So I just took my round wheel and ground them off. You know, put a little channel there, but that's fine. It's a little less surface area, helps it glide. You don't want to do too much of it so that it's not sitting there flat. But anyway, this is my most refined, latest version of a grinding jig. The other important piece of information about this grinding jig, which was for the others too, but I should mention it, is I'm not going to change it now, but I have a quick release down there that you can see. I can loosen that and go meow, 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 so I can change that angle. And I just use one of these cheapy, I'm always misplacing it, but just an Amazon angle finder. I zero it out on the platen. Then I put it on there. It tells me the angle, so I can repeatable angles, take notes of what blades get what angles. If you don't have a work rest that tilts like, now this is a reader grinder, and this is not the work rest that came with the reader grinder. This is a rest that I manufactured for it because I just like lots of space on my work rest. But one consideration that somebody commented on the previous video was the idea of if you don't have a table that tilts, or you don't have the wherewithal to make a table that tilts, you can, on most of these grinders, there is a screw here, and I could actually put a quick release on that too. There's a screw back there that would then allow the platen to rotate. So you could rotate the platen rather than the work rest. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. They both work well. I'm kind of interested. Tilting the platen kind of changes the geometry of things, and I like to get used to just grinding on a 90 degree with a 90 degree platen. It changes a lot of the dynamics of grinding. So for me, I'm not as interested, but I might try it once. So that's another important thing to this kind of jig, because this is a fixed 90 degree angle. And I have a lot of jigs, like, for instance, this is a jig I got from Moen Blade Works, or I forget the full name. This is a great jig. I like this jig particularly when I'm doing a large blade that's hanging out pretty far. It fits in here and flips like that. But this was $300, and it is good. I like it. I use it. But I don't, again, like, I try to make knives relatively quickly. Anything I could do to shave off a few minutes, I do. And it takes a while to tighten these things up in there. And so it's only when I'm trying to do something special, I'll be really careful. I use this jig for that. But for the ones that I repeat a lot, this has saved a lot of time. So, Knife Jig 3.0, I hope it helps somebody. The last time I said, hey, I'd build you one, I'll charge you, I think I said I'd charge $120. I had a number of people, it's highway robbery, I'm not gonna pay that, blah, 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 blah. I don't really wanna make jigs. I make knives, not jigs. But, so I'm not even gonna offer to make one of these. I had other people that wanted to order it, and I was just too busy to even be able to make one for them. But I think I've given you enough information here to be able to build this on your own. And again, I just want to reiterate one point. That needs to be a 90 degree angle, dead on. And so you're going to want to clean up the one side. And then if it's not a 90 degree out of the factory, the angle iron, then you want to get it and sand it and take off where you need to take off so that you get this thing exactly 90 degrees the whole way across. Otherwise, your blades will get cattywampus in terms of the grind. So thanks for watching. Subscribe and like if this video was helpful for you, and I'll see you on the next one.